The knock came just after 10. I still had bubble wrap on the floor and a half-eaten sandwich on a paper plate. I opened the door expecting a delivery or a neighbor. Instead, there stood my son Cameron grinning like a kid on Christmas morning. Behind him, his wife Marla, their 2 kids, and a woman I only knew from a grainy Facebook photo. Marla's mother, Evelyn. All of them with bags, luggage, backpacks, grocery totes. "You bought this for all of us, right?" Cameron said, stepping over the threshold before I had a chance to answer. "Even Mama needs a room." He kissed my cheek like it was a visit. But it wasn't a visit. Not with that much baggage. I blinked. What Marla breezed in behind him, her arm hooked around Evelyn's. "It's beautiful, Ramona. Love the trim. We'll need to put a safety gate by the back steps. Kyle almost fell at our old place." Their youngest ran through the hallway, yelling, dragging a duffel across my still scuffed hardwood floors. I hadn't even found the silverware drawer yet. I'd slept on an air mattress the night before because my bed frame was still unassembled. Evelyn gave me a quick nod, like we'd met before. "Smells new. I'll take the room with the window if that's all right." I stared, words bottling in my throat. I looked at Cameron. "You didn't say anything about moving in." He waved it off. "It's temporary, Mom. Just while we get our feet under us. Rent's crazy. You have space." My hands were still damp from washing dishes. I wiped them on my jeans. "You didn't call? You didn't ask. We're family," Marla said brightly. Like that made it okay. "It's not a big deal." I stood there still holding the door open behind me, the sun leaking across the porch, catching on the edge of the box labeled kitchen that I hadn't even unpacked. Cameron grabbed it. "Where should I put this pantry or garage?" I didn't answer. He set it on the counter like he lived there, like he always had. I watched him drop his keys in the bowl I'd set out for mine. I bought the cottage in early spring, quietly, intentionally, and under my maiden name. A family trust I'd set up years ago handled the purchase. After Robert died, I made sure I understood how to protect what little I had left. No one, not even Cameron, knew the exact name on the deed. They didn't ask. I didn't offer. The place was modest. 2 bedrooms, a study, and a small patch of fenced yard. Enough space for coffee in the sun and quiet in the evening. A clean start, I told myself. After 40 years of giving everything to other people, I wanted 4 walls that were mine. I imagined hanging family photos down the hallway. I imagined choosing my own curtains. I didn't imagine Evelyn robe unbelted adjusting the thermostat like it was hers. Or Marla, filling the pantry with brand-name snacks. Or my grandson slamming the bathroom door after leaving wet towels on the floor. The master bedroom mine was taken the first night. Evelyn had a bad back. Marla needed sleep. Cameron said, "It's just for now, Mom. You sleep light anyway." I found myself curled on a cot in the laundry nook. The washer hummed every morning before 6. The shelves above my head were now stocked with baby wipes, kids' sunscreen, and Marla's vitamins. My suitcase was still half-packed. No one seemed to notice. The next day, I came home from a quick grocery run to find Cameron rearranging the living room. He was moving my armchair, Robert's armchair, into the garage. "We're just opening it up a bit," he said. "Feels more livable." I looked at the armchair. The cushion still held the shape of Robert's shoulders. He died in it. I stood in the middle of my own living room and didn't say a word. Not when Evelyn asked if I had chamomile tea. Not when Marla handed me a grocery list. Not even when Cameron told the kids to give Grandma a break, she's just adjusting. That night, I made coffee and drank it standing in the hallway. I was folding towels in the hallway when I heard Marla's voice drift through the crack in the door. "She's better off in the small room anyway. She's retired. What does she need space for?" There was a pause, then Evelyn's voice lower. "Exactly. She's lucky we're here. That house was too big for her alone." I didn't move. My fingers were clenched around a hand towel that still smelled like my old detergent. I stood there until I heard them change the subject, light laughter following, like none of it mattered. Later that same day, I overheard my grandson in the kitchen whispering to his sister, "Ask the old lady who makes toast. She doesn't do anything else." He didn't know I was behind the fridge door pouring milk into my coffee. I said nothing. I wanted to believe it was just bad timing, that they didn't mean it. But the tone in Marla's voice was too practiced, too casual, like this had all been discussed before. That evening, I went looking for my checkbook. I always kept it in the filing drawer under my desk. It wasn't there. I checked again. Nothing. 2 days later, I found it in the kitchen junk drawer wedged between a broken charger and a child's crayon. Several checks were missing. I opened my filing box. Tax papers were gone. I asked Cameron if he'd seen them. He shrugged and said he thought I was going paperless. Marla chimed in. "Everything's digital now, Ramona. Nobody keeps stacks of old forms unless they're hiding something." The comment felt pointed. I started noticing how conversations dropped off the moment I entered a room. Marla and Evelyn whispering by the sink, their phones tucked out of view. Cameron tapping away on his laptop, while the kids played with tablets I didn't recognize. I checked the Wi-Fi history. A new laptop had been added to the network last week. The name on it was Evelyn Home 23. One night, I caught Cameron in the dining room going through a folder I kept in the drawer marked Home Maintenance. He closed it quickly when I walked in. "Just checking what's due," he said too casually. I made another cup of coffee. No one asked why I stayed up so late. I spent 22 years managing the books at the high school. I caught every missing receipt, every teacher reimbursement error, every cent that went sideways. I may have retired, but numbers still make sense in a way people don't. So I started watching mine. I set up balance alerts, transaction flags, account access limits. It took 10 minutes on the bank's website. Less time than it took Marla to tell me we were out of almond milk again. 3 days later, a notification pinged my phone while I was in the bathroom brushing my teeth. $1, $200 withdrawn. The memo line said, "Family groceries." I hadn't bought anything. Over the next 3 weeks, the numbers kept shifting. Quietly, efficiently, just like I used to do at my desk after hours. Only this time, I wasn't the one controlling the accounts. By the end of the 3rd week, the total was over $9,000 gone from my savings. I printed everything out and took the papers to the public library to use their scanner. I wanted clean copies. I didn't want anything touched inside my house. I called the bank and asked a few questions. "There's a new joint account linked to my savings," I said. "Yes, ma'am. Opened last month. And who are the names on that account?" She paused. "Primary, Marla Ellery. Secondary, Cameron Ellery, not Ramona Ellery." "No, ma'am. I wrote it down word for word. They didn't just move in, they were moving me out. One signature at a time." That night, I sat at the kitchen table with the lights off and listened to them laugh from the living room. I watched Evelyn walk past, holding a glass of my wine. I saw Cameron with his feet on the coffee table, a pen tucked behind his ear, flipping through my homeowner's insurance. I opened my drawer, pulled out a yellow pad, and wrote one line at the top in all caps. Final plan. I started waking at 5. It was the only time the house was still mine. The kids wouldn't be up for another hour, and Evelyn never rose before 7. Marla liked to sleep in on account of her stress migraines, and Cameron had started doing morning calls from the back porch. Calls I wasn't supposed to hear, but did. So I made my coffee quietly, using the old percolator I brought from the last house, and sat at the dining table with my laptop and a manila folder full of statements. One by one, I laid out every transaction, every printout, every notification. They weren't just stealing money. They were preparing to remove me legally. The forged documents arrived in my email as part of a loan inquiry confirmation from the bank. A refinance application had been submitted using my address with a note attached, "Owner deceased property in transition to family trust." My name wasn't even on it. I called a number I hadn't dialed in years. Tom Brightman, the attorney who helped me structure the trust when Robert passed. He'd handled our wills, our savings plans, and later, my decision to hold assets under my maiden name for protection. I drove to his office with everything in a tote bag. I didn't tell anyone I was leaving. Tom flipped through the papers slowly, his brow tightening. They can't refinance it, he said at last, tapping the top document. They have no legal ownership. The house belongs to the trust, and that trust is airtight. You did everything right. I nodded, but I didn't feel relief. Not yet. Tom leaned back in his chair. What worries me is this language, owner deceased. That's not just forgery. That's attempted fraud. And if the bank processes it, you'll have a bigger mess. Can I stop it? I asked. He looked me straight in the eye. Yes. But you'll need to move faster than they do. When I got home, the kitchen was loud. Someone had left crumbs across the counter and jelly on the cabinet handle. My armchair was missing again. I poured another cup of coffee and went to the guest room closet where I'd stored the fireproof box. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I didn't ask them to leave. I just planned. For 2 weeks, I packed their things in the early mornings before the sun came up, before the house stirred. Every drawer, every closet. I labeled boxes clearly. Marla bedroom closet, Kyle toys, Evelyn bathroom cabinet. I rented a storage unit under my name, moved the first load myself, hired a moving company for the rest, told them to come on Saturday at 10 sharp. Said it was an assisted departure. They didn't ask questions. Cameron told me that morning they were heading to Costco. Bulk snacks, paper towels, another flat of bottled water I never touched. They wouldn't be home until mid-afternoon. At 10:02, the truck pulled up. By 10:05, I'd opened every window in the house and propped open the front door. The men were quick, polite, no nonsense. I gave them labeled maps for each box. They carried out Evelyn's makeup table like it weighed nothing. By noon, the house felt like mine again. At 12:30, I changed the locks. At 1:15, I placed a manila envelope on the front door with 2 strips of clear tape. Inside were printed transaction logs, screenshots of the fake refinance application, the forged death certificate reference, and a copy of the original trust deed with my name printed in bold. I included one handwritten note. This home is not your inheritance. It was never your right. It was a gift you tried to steal. I signed it. Then I brewed myself a fresh pot of coffee, cleaned the counter, and turned on the small radio in the kitchen for the first time since I'd moved in. The jazz station was playing something old and slow. When they returned at 2:12, I didn't go to the window. I stayed seated, listening to the sound of tires skidding in gravel. Raised voices, a fist banging once then twice on the locked door. I didn't get up. The boxes sat neatly along the edge of the lawn, untouched. Their clothes folded, their shoes paired, their belongings accounted for down to the last towel. By sundown, they were gone again, this time without a key. The call came just after 9. I let it ring twice before answering. Are you out of your mind? Cameron's voice hit hard, tight with rage. You blindsided us. We have kids, Mom. I had a life too, I said. One you erased. You could have talked to us first. I tried. You didn't hear me. There was a pause. Then the volume rose again. You humiliated us, he spat. You think packing our things and leaving them in the yard was some kind of noble act? You think this makes you right? I think it made me free, he scoffed. You'll regret this. You're pushing away the only family you have. I already did, I said quietly. That's why I stopped. The silence that followed wasn't the kind that begged for reconciliation. It was the kind that settled. Final. Like a door closing slowly but firmly. He didn't say goodbye. He just hung up. I sat with the phone in my hand for a long time. My thumb hovered over the screen. I thought about the baby I'd held in my arms 35 years ago. The little boy who cried when I left him at kindergarten. The teenager who barely looked up from his cereal bowl. The man who called me mom when he needed a place to land. I opened the contact and hit delete. Not out of hate, not even anger, but because I was done rehearsing conversations that never changed. Done making room in my heart for people who only came in to rearrange the furniture. That evening, I walked around the house slowly. I opened each door, each drawer, each cabinet. I touched the things I had chosen for myself. The worn blanket folded on the couch, the chipped coffee mug from the thrift shop. The wind chimes I'd hung by the back door. No one asked me for anything. No one called me the old lady who makes toast. I turned off the lights, poured the last of the coffee into my cup, and stood in the middle of the kitchen alone, but not empty. In the morning, Evelyn came back. She showed up at noon dressed in her Sunday best, like it was a job interview. I watched her from the front window as she adjusted her blouse collar, checked her reflection in the car mirror, then walked up my porch steps with a forced grace that didn't match the look in her eyes. Yvette didn't knock. She rang the bell 3 times like she was waiting for a butler. When I opened the door, I didn't invite her in. She smiled anyway. "Ramona, I thought maybe we could talk." Woman to woman. I said nothing, just stepped aside far enough so she could see the boxed-up silence behind me. She took it as encouragement. "We don't want trouble," she began. "We just misunderstood. Marla's under pressure and Cameron. Well, you know how he is when he gets cornered." Still, I said nothing. She reached into her purse and pulled out a folded check. "We're prepared to pay rent, a fair amount, monthly, just until we find something else. It doesn't have to be the master bedroom." I looked at the check. I looked at her hand. Neither moved. "You already collected enough," I said. Her eyebrows twitched. "Excuse me." I didn't raise my voice. "From my fridge? From my time? From my dignity?" Her mouth opened like she had a retort waiting, but nothing came out. I shut the door gently. Not a slam. Not a scene. Just the end of a conversation I never agreed to have. She pounded once with the side of her fist. "This isn't over, Ramona." I turned the lock. Inside the house was quiet again. I went to the sink, rinsed out my coffee cup, and placed it on the drying rack. I wiped down the counter even though it wasn't dirty. Outside, her car idled for a few minutes. Then it pulled away without ceremony. That night, I swept the porch and folded the blanket over my reading chair. The wind chimes rattled softly by the back door. In the morning, I rearranged the furniture. I moved the armchair back to where it belonged by the window that caught the late afternoon light. I rolled out the rug I had stored in the hall closet, folded the blankets the way I like, hung the framed photo of Robert above the bookshelf. Not because I missed him in that moment, but because this house deserved to remember who built the foundation beneath me. For the first time since I moved in, I set up my desk by the front window facing the street. The drawers held pens I liked. The surface stayed clean. I placed a small ceramic bowl there to hold my keys. Just mine. The house no longer smelled like unfamiliar detergent or children's snacks. It smelled like lemon oil and fresh coffee. The kind I made on my own schedule. The kind no one ever asked me to buy more of. There was quiet again, but it wasn't hollow. It was spacious. I started opening the curtains each morning. I let light flood into the corners they used to fill with noise. I could hear birds again. The refrigerator didn't slam. The hallway didn't echo with demands. It was just me. And that was enough. At the library downtown, I joined a Tuesday morning coffee group. 12 women, some older, some younger. Nobody asked me what I had to give. They asked what I liked to read. When I introduced myself, no one said, "Cameron's mom" or "the old woman who makes toast." They just nodded and said, "Nice to meet you, Ramona." I sat with that name all morning. It fit better now. Back home, I painted the small guest room the shade of green I liked, not because it was neutral, not because it was practical, but because it made me feel calm. That night, I read by the light of the standing lamp I bought secondhand. The chair beneath me didn't creak with anyone else's weight. My shoes sat by the door. My keys stayed in their bowl. The next day, a letter arrived. It was from Cameron. The envelope arrived without a return address, but I recognized the handwriting. Cameron always wrote like he was in a hurry. Tall letters slanted to the right, too much pressure on the pen. It had been 6 months. I sat at the kitchen table and opened it slowly, like something inside might still bite. The letter was short, 2 paragraphs. He said they were moving again. Something about a new opportunity in another state. He didn't say where. He didn't ask how I was. He didn't say sorry. At the bottom, in smaller print, a P. Let's hope the house still feels warm. I folded the page once and placed it under the coffee mug I'd just poured. Then I took out a note card and wrote 2 words. It does. I sealed it, wrote his name on the front and set it on the counter. I didn't plan to mail it. It wasn't for him. It was for me. Outside, the trees were just starting to turn. The wind moved gently across the porch, brushing against the wind chimes like a soft reminder. I stepped out barefoot, holding my mug in both hands. The air was crisp. I stood there for a while, breathing it in. No cars in the driveway, no voices inside, no one calling from the hallway. Just me. And still there was warmth. The rug I picked, the photos I framed, the silence I earned. I turned back toward the front door. The paint was still smooth where I'd touched it up last week. The lock clicked easily as I turned the key. This time, I didn't rush. I stood there with the key in the lock, holding it for a moment longer than necessary. Not because I was unsure, but because I understood now the door had never been the thing that kept me safe. It was the fact that this key was mine. I pocketed it, stepped back inside, and closed the door behind me without a sound. Tomorrow, I'd buy a new chair for the guest room, not because anyone was coming, but because I could.